What is up, everyone, and welcome back to the Wedding Planning Podcast. I am your host, Monica. I am hosting solo today, but we have an amazing guest with us from Parched Floral, Amanda. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Monica. Happy to be here.
Why don't you just start by telling us about yourself and your business?
Okay, awesome. So my name's Amanda, and I am a mom of two. I'm here in Ancaster, Ontario. So a little bit far away from you, but basically I'm a flower preservationist, and that's kind of new to everyone who isn't in the wedding industry or recently engaged. I get a lot of blank stares when I say that that's what I do for a living. But basically I take fresh flowers and old flowers, and I press them into art. So I flatten them into framed art.
That's awesome. And how did you get into this? Was this something that you always, you were always into flowers?
So, okay, are you ready for like a little bit of like a sad story, Monica?
Always. We like the raw stories here.
Okay. So basically, like I was in event planning, also not wedding planning, but corporate event planning, basically my entire life since I was, a young girl. I'm close to 40 now, but basically I was doing corporate event planning. So for banks, a law firm, I was in tech, nonprofit, and I was just basically I'm an ex-corporate ladder climber.
Yep.
I started as an executive assistant and made my way up to chief of staff at my last company. And I had a baby at the time, and I got pregnant with my second baby, and that corporate hustle was getting to be a lot, the commuting and everything. And when COVID happened, my father suddenly passed away unexpectedly at the age of 59, so quite young. And everybody had sent me flowers. Obviously, sympathy flowers is something that you do. And I had basically an entire house filled with these flowers. And it was obviously a very sad time. And the flowers started to die. They started to rot. I wasn't really in a place where I really felt like changing out the water and cutting the stems to keep them well. And I thought to myself, this is these flowers mean so much to me. And it's sad that they're all dying. And at that moment, someone had sent me a bridal bouquet because I walked down the aisle with my dad. It was a replica of my bouquet. And I pulled the eucalyptus stem from it because I don't know, it was in the nicest condition, and I love eucalyptus. And I just set it out, and it dried beautifully. And I from there on thought, why isn't preserved flowers, like dried flowers, more of a thing? Like, why don't people preserve these memories if flowers are so special and sentimental to people? So after that, I was working a full-time job, and I basically said, like dried flowers. I started off in the dried floral business. So pampas grass, home decor, basically. And I had heard of this flower preservation, but it's a craft. It's not something you just jump into. So behind the scenes, I basically practiced this craft for an entire year while I had my dried floral business. And while I was kind of advertising and marketing that side of things, I got a lot of inquiries for flower preservation from people that had heard of it. And I couldn't really say like, yes, I'm ready to take on bridal bouquets. I took on little tiny small commissions, but never bridal, because
you're still perfecting it. Yeah.
You cannot ruin a bridal bouquet. That would be, my worst nightmare, anyone's worst nightmare. So after that year, when I got completely comfortable, I learned all the tricks. There's so many tricks of the trade. And I felt comfortable taking on bridal commissions. I opened up business to do that. So that's how we started. So it started off with tragedy, but ended in a great story.
It's a very sad story, but it sounds like it got you to where you're meant to be. And it's funny that you say it's a craft, because I was in my sister's wedding and I had a bridesmaid bouquet, and I was like, I've seen this online. How hard can it be for me to like take the flowers, put it in the wax paper, put it in my heavy cookbooks, and let it sit for a month and see what happens? And half the flowers went moldy. I was like, how is this even possible? So it is 100% a craft.
Yeah. And listen, you can have luck with it. It's a great hobby. I always say to anyone who's interested, like, do that. If you have flowers from any other occasions other than your wedding, or maybe a memorial, don't practice with your really important flowers, but
maybe your Valentine's Day bouquet.
Yeah, your Valentine's Day flowers. if the flowers go moldy, there's a sign. That's your sign. But no, yeah, it can turn out beautifully, and it's not that it's hard, it's that it is a craft. It's very
Yeah.
particular. There's so many elements that go into it, and it has to be learned.
100%. So what does Parched Floral offer now? It sounds like you've kind of evolved.
Yes. So I'm actually moving out of the home decor side of things. I still get orders, but I kind of focus really on the bridal preservation. It keeps me very, very busy. I sold out last year, and I'm already booked more. I have booked more commissions than I did last year already, and we're only in March. So it's going to be a very, very crazy season. So basically, flower preservation is 100% what we do. Where we've shifted this year in 2023 is I now offer, if you've saved your bridal bouquet or you didn't know about flower preservation, I actually learned a new craft that no one in Ontario at least is offering, and that's to basically rehydrate and revive old flowers and press them.
You can do that?
You can. You can't Google it anywhere. You can't find, like, it's an actual thing that I was like, there has to be a way to do this. And I've been practicing that for about 6 months. I perfected it, and I did my first one last week.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so it's really cool because I personally don't, and it's to each their own, but I personally don't like the look of dried flowers as they are in a shadow box.
Mhm.
I love the look of pressed, and I love the look of fresh to shadow box, but when they dry up, they kind of get shriveled.
Yeah.
The color is gone. And with the way I do it, I still retain the same color. So the colors are more antique looking, but pressed, they look really beautiful.
That's awesome. So like if somebody maybe was holding onto their bouquet for a few months and it's dried out and they've decided, I actually want to do something with this, you can kind of like bring it back to life in a way.
Exactly, yes. And like greenery, flowers, everything. And what's kind of different about my craft than a lot of artists is I actually deconstruct all of my stems. So that includes the already dried and the fresh. I take apart almost every petal. Some flowers don't lend well to doing that, but for the most part, I take them all apart. I get better color retention, and I'm also able to kind of do a lot more with the petals.
No, I've seen some of your work. It's beautiful. It's very much more like not so much here's your bouquet, but like here's your bouquet and I've kind of made it my own.
Exactly. Yes. Like an art piece.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what is the process when it comes to pressing and drying flowers? Like how much time can people expect?
For sure. So different preservationists require the bouquet to them in different time frames. For me, I actually have a little bit of a longer window. I accept bouquets even after your event up to 5 days. I've even had one 10 days old and able to save it. The expectations are obviously set at the time, when I get your flowers, if they are half dead, but there are some beautiful stems that I can work with, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Where some artists will turn that away, which I totally get because it is trickier and also the results aren't as optimal. But I don't know, I find beauty in some of even the ones that are sad, and I take it as a challenge. So what you can expect is when you get married, most people book in advance. I would say 80% are advanced bookings, but there are a lot of last minute. So if you stumble across me, if you can book your date online, and everything is self-serve online on my website, if you can book your date, that means that it's available.
Okay.
So I take last minute after your wedding, and I'm in Ancaster, so you can either drop it off to me in Ancaster, Ontario, or you can ship it anywhere from Canada overnight or 2-day. And I get 30% of my business is actually shipped. So
awesome.
All over Canada last year. It was great. And I had no bouquet that arrived damaged because I give detailed shipping instructions to you when you book. So you just send me your bouquet in a box. I give you those instructions. You send it to me. I press them the day that I get them. And then the drying process is 4 to 5 weeks, sometimes 6 weeks with tropical flowers. And after that, I send you a little message and I say, your bouquet's out of the press. You can be expecting a mock-up. And why I kind of give that warning, you're going to be expecting a mock-up within a week, is because once the flowers are out of the press, I do need to work with them pretty quickly. Not because obviously my studio, if I have everything open all the time, it can become crazy and flowers are very delicate. Once they're out, humidity's in the air and they can start to retain moisture. So To keep them flat, I like to get them adhered as quickly as possible to their final place. And so once I send a mock-up, there's usually a week turnaround before your frame is done and dried and framed. So that's the whole process. I say actually up to 3 to 4 months during busy season, you can expect your frame back, but it can be as quick as 6 weeks.
No, that totally makes sense. And then when they live in the frames, do they kind of keep their shape because the frames are flat?
Exactly. So because I'm adhering them as well, and then they're in the frame sealed and pressed, I actually, 95% of my frames are actually on an acid-free back mat.
Okay.
Which in itself pulls out the moisture, which is kind of nice. So these spring flowers are forever. So they're going to last, like, there's pressed flowers from hundreds and hundreds of years ago that people have. I have one in my mother-in-law's house that she pressed, 40 years ago. And while they look really different, the color is totally different. It's still a beautiful piece that she did herself. And yeah, they're meant to be passed down to generations too. So
that's amazing. So do the colors, like once they're pressed and you have them in the frames, is that what it's going to look like forever, or over time it starts to like antique?
100% it's going to fade. All flowers do. The more vibrant colors like the reds and the purples, they tend to hold on to their color pretty well. They will change to just a different shade of that color over time. Within 1 year to 5 years, it'll change probably the most, and then it'll kind of stay. But they bleach out, but not like it's, you use the word that I use, which is correct. It's an antique look. It's just like a faded out version of themselves. I have started color correcting some of my whites, just because some brides do love like the antique feel that whites get. I can talk about the whites a little bit longer because they're a very specific flower, but the color is going to be a completely different version of itself in 5 years than it is right now. But because
I like that though, because it kind of like builds character, and it's like, it's the piece of like art that keeps on giving.
Exactly. And different from 2022 to now to this year also is that I've included 99% UV protected acrylic.
Okay.
So all flowers are going to fade, but I've made it the most, I've given your flowers the best possible chance that they can at retaining their color for the longest. And that's new this year. It was an option that I offered, but I didn't advertise because it is expensive. But I've just worked it into my pricing, and I think it's just an important piece.
No, that's totally amazing. So is there anything specific that like clients need to know when it comes to booking this type of service?
For sure. So last year was all about white flowers and greenery, and lots of greenery. As you probably saw, it's a classic.
This year is going to be similar. Neutrals, pastels.
Really? Yeah. Okay. See, I don't know like tons of the floral trends. I see them as they come.
Yeah.
But white specifically, like that was actually my wedding. I was all whites and greenery. And I was I loved my wedding. I love my classic look. But now that I'm a flower preservationist, there are some things to consider when you're a bride. So white flowers, when you press them, will go beige no matter what. It is what it is. That is how all flowers go, whether it's a rose or a tulip or a ranunculus. Roses are the ones that go the most beige, and those are the most popular wedding flower, right? So if you have roses in your bouquet and they're white, it's kind of something I give brides a heads up about, because you might not be expecting that in your final. Other whites, all other whites and flowers, they actually stay pretty good. They go like a little bit beige, but they actually retain their color pretty well. Ranunculus look beautiful as well once they're pressed, and stock flowers are beautiful. But I would just say like the biggest thing when you're choosing your flowers, if you're thinking about preserving your flowers, your wedding day is one day, and it's going to be the most amazing day of your life, and you're going to like love having all those flowers around. Like I always say, like, I'm not one person to say like bring your budget down on the flowers, because I just love the flowers in my photos. I think it just like was everything. But the saddest part of my wedding was the next day when I threw them all out and gave them away. I was frantically trying to have people keep them. But I would just say pick for variations and pick texture, and like just be like, allow your florist they know their flowers the most. They know what's in, but they also know what you like. So like let them have a little bit of creativity with the textures and the different elements of your bouquet, because I was that bride who was like, I'm only having roses and Italian ruscus and eucalyptus, no this, no this. And I was that person. I like picked every stem in my bridal bouquet, which wasn't very many different variations. It was, looking back, I'm like, it's kind of boring.
Yeah.
But if you're thinking about preserving your thing, remember that piece of art's going to be on your wall. So like have a little bit of fun with it. It's going to be on your wall forever. I always say it's an investment for you. It's your first piece of art that you are going to have as a couple. And it's going to be a keepsake from your best day ever for the rest of your life. And you have your dress, but it's in a box. You have your pictures. Some might be on the wall, but most of them
They're
are
on the
probably
computer. Yeah.
on the computer. But this is like an art piece that when someone walks into your room and they see pressed flowers, which is not a very, like, it's not a lot of people have, they're gonna be like, what is that? And then you get to relive your day again, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100% about let the florist kind of have the creative freedom. They know what's in season. They kind of know, as long as you give them a rough idea, they know what's going to look good. They know what's in season, and they can kind of bring your vision to life. I actually didn't tell my florist anything. I was just like, here's the colors, go for it. And she did amazing. So you kind of like, yeah, we always say like, just you hire these people for a reason.
Yeah.
They do this craft for a reason. So you just have to trust your vendors.
Yeah, I love that. They're artists. They really are. And like you see that when, I mean, I have never appreciated flowers more or florists more than in my life now. But I think like when you're a bride and you're getting caught up, you want to have all that control. And yeah.
But I love what you do too, because you're right. It kills me at the end of the night when we're like, what do you want to do with your flowers? And they're like, I'm flying back home tomorrow. I can't take them. And we're like, okay. Like we donate them now to like hospice centers and stuff, but it's nice to like have that piece that you're like, actually, we could send it from Calgary to someone like yourself, and then it could be sent to wherever the couple lives. So I think that that's amazing.
Yeah.
So is there like certain flowers that like maybe don't turn out as nicely when it comes to pressing them?
So I actually press all flowers. Like I even press King Proteas, and like they're big, thick. I don't know if you know them, but like I will basically take apart any flower and I'll figure out a way to press it. Like
Okay.
That's also something in the practice that, you know, would intimidate a new artist, but now like I will take apart and dissect like with a knife, everything to get it perfectly flat so I can press it for you. Tropicals retain obviously so much more moisture than regular flowers. They're super hard to press. A lot of them go brown, especially orchids. Orchids I have color corrected, but some of them will go brown, some of them won't, depending on the type of orchid, because there's hundreds of them.
Mm-hmm.
The really thick tropical flowers are very, very tricky. So usually if I have a very tropical bouquet, I'll let the bride know, typically this is what happens to this flower, because we know like it's,
yeah, you know, over time.
Exactly. Like it's a science, but also it's not like anything can happen to a flower, but for the most part, the same thing kind of color changes happen. And so I would just say tropical flowers are the hardest, but it's not that they can't be done. It's just that the outcome is they're not going to look the same.
That's fair. That's fair. And it's nice that you're honest up front.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly is the color correcting process? Is that after you've pressed them and you see, oh, it's a little bit more cream than I wanted, or a little bit more brown, and then you color correct them?
Exactly. So I started off all last year. This is new this year because last year I did not color correct. It's very, very time consuming. It's very particular. You have to be so, so gentle with the flowers because they're very, very delicate after they're pressed. They're paper thin and they rip and tear and break, basically touching them, which is why they belong in a frame. But color correcting involves basically I'm using different mediums to either paint or color your flowers, to either add an accent that might have been beautiful that got lost, or it's honestly mostly color correcting those whites. And it's because if the bride really, really loved that bright white and she wants that, then I will color correct, because it's not that it can't be done. It just takes a lot more time. So there's a little bit more time frame. I haven't been charging extra for that just because I don't know. It's also, I'm an artist and it creates like a totally different piece. So I actually enjoy the process. It's just that they have to be patient and work with me to see kind of like which flowers they want to color correct, because color correcting all of them, you don't want like a completely painted bouquet, because then you kind of lose that organic feel, which is super nice. but taking a few little accent pieces and making them bright white just to bring back that, memory of your bouquet is always nice.
And will those pieces still like fade over time with the rest of the petals, or will they always be that bright white?
They will always be that bright white.
That's
So
nice.
yeah. So like if you like orchids in particular, like those, the ones that always go brown, they look beautiful, like painted. They really, really do, because it's usually like a bold piece anyways. Orchids are very in right now. And it's usually something that stood out in their bouquet anyway. So
Yes.
orchids look beautiful, color corrected.
No, and I think that's great, because then you'll always still have like a touch of what your florals looked like on the day, whether it be 5 years later or 40 years later.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier that people can ship their flowers to you. So how does that process work to make sure that the flowers get to you in the best shape possible?
Sure. So I send shipping instructions, and basically that entails I give you a list of supplies that you need beforehand. So that gets sent a month before your wedding. And I just basically, it's all stuff that you can get from the dollar store. It includes like a compost bag, an elastic band, like paper towel, like simple things. And basically, we're trying to keep your flowers hydrated without shipping them with water. So if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
basically, it entails you need to do a little bit of care after your wedding to make sure that your flowers have a chance to drink before they jump into the box. Making sure that you ship them on the first business day and not on the weekend, because or on, let's say if you have a Friday wedding, some places actually do ship outs on Saturdays and Sundays, or they ship it on Saturday, but they're closed Sunday. So what we don't want is your flowers sitting in a box longer than the 24 to 36 hour mark, because they will die. And we just basically make sure that they're very, very cushioned and happy, no plastic in sight, that they have wet paper towel wrapped around their stems, that your stems had been trimmed, they've drank water before they go into that box, and you're leaving it to the very last second to put them in that box before you ship them. And honestly, like they travel really, really well, because you have to think about, most flowers aren't homegrown, like as much as I would love to say everyone uses Ontario flowers. It's just, we
It's
have
not facts.
yeah. We have, like, you know what I mean? And also we don't have the variety. So a lot of flowers come from Ecuador, for example. So they're coming from farms, they're going to go to a wholesaler, then they're going to go to a florist, and then it's going to go to your wedding, and then it's going to spend all day in a party being like manhandled. I shouldn't use that. Let's edit that one out. They're going to be they're going to be thrown around, and then they arrive to me after being in a box for 24 hours.
Yeah.
So like the fact that they arrive as what in great condition is like always mind-boggling to me. Even on wedding days, when I see flowers now, I'm like, you came from Ecuador and you look perfect. How?
That's so true. No one ever thinks of that. Like, I've never thought about it in that way, that like this flower that's at this wedding didn't just come from the flower shop. It's probably traveled. That's such a good point. So of course they can travel across, and especially I feel like it's probably cool, like the elements keep them cool as well. So
Yeah.
wow, that's such a great point. I never thought of.
And also they have a journey, like you, not only from the farm to into the like where they're being processed in. I always use Ecuador because so many flowers come from there, but like there were strikes there last year. They had to like travel on a truck through like protests, and like it's all like flowers have a story too, which is, that's why I think it's so cool as well. Like that we need to appreciate the flowers and their imperfections as well.
100%. And do you find that flowers that maybe were outside at a winter wedding compared to flowers that maybe were outside at like a blazing hot wedding, do those kind of come out differently as well?
Yeah, so 100% those like June, July, August weddings, when they come to me, especially if they're white flowers, they do come like more injured, I guess you could say, because every hand that touches them, the oils from your hand will create a spot that you actually don't see when they're fresh, but when they're pressed, you can actually see. A little bit more browning, a little bit more wilting. But when I actually get the flowers, especially hydrangeas, they usually arrive to me completely shriveled and like looking like they're on their last leg.
Yes.
I honestly, every single time I get flowers before I put them in the press, I give them 3 hours to just hang out in water, sugar water. So I cut every single stem, put them in sugar water. Sugar water, if just as like a hot tip, if you ever get flowers from someone, put like a couple tablespoons of sugar into the water instead of flour food. I mean, you can use flour food if you have it, but not all of them come with it. And that will perk everything up. Like
Great
it
to
will
know.
go
Okay.
completely dead and it will literally just like come back to life.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've
Just
learned
like
so much.
sugar. Yeah.
So with your pieces, I know you mentioned it a bit earlier. Do you ever do like complete replicas of bouquets, or does it tend to be like creative designs so that every piece looks unique?
So while I ask for creative freedom when I create a piece, because again, this is art as well. I get actually brides to select brides and grooms, or grooms and grooms and brides. I get them to select the layout that they would like ahead of time. So when I'm working with the flowers, I know how to press them. So there's different layouts and I have to press them different ways depending on which way they choose. And I actually choose the amount of flowers that I press as well based on their frame size and their layout. So I would say 80% of my bouquets are actually classic layout, which is a replica of the bouquet. So it's that
Mhm.
classic shape. And I try to actually, I take a picture when I document them when they arrive. I replicate that picture when I'm designing. So I have it up on my computer and I'm actually designing it to be just like your bouquet, even down to the placement of the flowers and the greenery. But the other options, there's garden style, which looks like it's naturally growing. There's also mosaic, which is my personal favorite, which is basically like a puzzle piece of different flowers. I do like a waterfall pattern of them going across the page. And then I can do completely custom. If you're like, listen, take my flowers and do what you want with them and send me a couple mock-ups. That is always lovely as well. But I love, like, replicas are great because it does remind you of your bouquet as it was, but also people that like a little bit more of a modern vibe, it's like no one would ever know that that pressed art on your wall was your bridal bouquet until you talk about it, which is cool.
I like that. It's like a conversation piece. It's not necessarily like I come into your house and like, oh, that's your bouquet from your wedding. Looks stunning. It's more like, oh my gosh, where did you get these flowers done? What is this? Like, I
Mhm.
really like that.
Yeah, exactly. I actually have to press my bouquet because this didn't exist when I was married, and mine are in the basement all shriveled up. And I've been taking on so many commissions that I haven't focused on my
Yeah,
own, because that's as it is. Like
that's how it
your
is.
life
Yeah.
is probably completely disorganized, and
Yes.
even your professional life is completely like, you
How did
know,
you know?
it's how it goes. But when I do go ahead and do mine, I'm gonna create something really different, and I'm excited to do it. I just need to get around to doing it.
Will you have to rehydrate yours first? Like you'll use your new technique?
Yeah. So what I'm going to do, because I do offer this service as well, is to, if you don't want that antique look of your flowers, I can also replicate your flowers with your florist that you used, or a different florist. But I'm going to buy some fresh pieces that were in my bouquet, and I'm going to incorporate my actual petals as well, because they were
Oh,
all
that'll be
white.
so cool. So it'll be kind of like a mix of new and old. I love that.
Yes, like a little renewal of the vows. Maybe I'll do it for like an anniversary, and I'll put it up
Yeah.
on our wall with
Get your husband to buy you the flowers so that they have some
Oh,
extra meaning to them.
I love that.
So approximately what can people expect the investment to be when it comes to getting their flowers preserved in this way?
Certainly. So it's not cheap. I will throw that out there. I like that you use the word investment. Um, I don't know the stats, but I'm like, from the top of my head, like you're the event wedding planner. But I think like on the average, people spend around $3,000 on a wedding, and
That's
then
kind
like,
of like the
yeah,
minimum right now.
okay.
If you want like the archway, the aisle flowers, the centerpieces, the bouquets, that's kind of like the minimum, I'd say.
Okay, because like most, from what I follow tons of florists, obviously most of them say that their budgets start at 10,000. A lot of them.
Oh, wow.
Because we're in Toronto. That's a minimum budget for flowers for a lot of weddings. I think it's like 150 people plus. But
Yeah.
um, I spent quite a big chunk of my wedding budget on flowers. But so all that to say, like, you're spending a lot of hard-earned money on flowers. So why I love to use the word investment in this art piece is you know, art is an investment, your flowers are an investment, and this is a memory and a keepsake that you will have forever. So with all being said, like I think it's pretty reasonable, but we start at $200 for an 8x10 frame, which is basically just taking a few flowers from your bouquet and pressing it so that you have a little keepsake either for your nightstand or to add to a gallery wall. So that includes like 4 to 5 flowers, so very small. And then we have an 11x14, which goes up to it's $400 Canadian, and 16x20, which is $500. And that is all for our classic acid-free back mat on our frame. If you want a floating frame, which is the clear background, that's an additional $85. And the only reason for that is because it is an extra couple of steps to do that, and a lot more time, because you have to be a lot more I don't know, there's a lot more that goes into having a clear back.
I actually feel like that's very reasonable to spend thousands and thousands on your flowers. I feel like that's very reasonably priced for preservation and something that you get to keep forever.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it takes about from the time that I receive flowers, just in case your listeners want to know, you know, flower preservation is a very meticulous, time-consuming thing. It's like a lovely job. Like, actually, I love that I get to play with flowers all day. It's awesome. But it is like a very tedious job that takes a long time. So it takes about 10 to 12 hours per frame to do.
Wow. Okay. And that's like after you've pressed them and everything, that's just like the design side, or that includes
that's the processing when I get them. So when I actually receive your bouquet, I go through it all and prep the flowers. So as you as I talked about, like rehydrating and all them. So I go through and I take all the stems and basically pick out the best ones that are going to work the best. I hang up all the ones that I'm not going to be using that are in good condition to dry, and I give those back to you as well. And then actually deconstructing all of the stems and putting them into the presses. There's also a process of, like, I actually check on your flowers every couple of days and change out things where I need to. So there's lots of hours actually during the pressing process.
wow.
All of my presses along the way. Like it's a very technical thing, surprisingly. I know some people use books. I have no idea how to press flowers with a book. But I use old traditional slow pressing method, which is basically wood and cardboard and paper. And I make sure my humidity levels are correct in my studio, airflow, temperature, all of that. There's a lot.
There's so many factors. Like, it's not just like a cut and dry, boom, your flowers are done. That's incredible what you do.
Yeah,
I wouldn't recommend the book method. That's the method I used and got moldy flowers. So I wouldn't recommend that.
I'm sure there's a craft to that as well, but I have not tried it myself.
So does anyone that wants a piece of art, maybe sees your work online, but maybe they don't have some flowers available, that they just had a wedding or memorial or something, do you ever do pieces that people can buy directly that you creatively make?
I do. So I have a one-of-a-kind gallery online that doesn't have anything in it right now because I'm sold out. But during this time, the January, February, March is when I'm pressing flowers for that reason. So I do sell pieces that are not commissioned pieces. So I have my first set coming out of my press in a couple of weeks. I do have a market coming up that I don't do a lot of markets, but I do have one coming up that I will be selling those at as well. But anything that's left over or any pieces I don't bring to that will be up online. And then throughout the year, I do try to, when I have a little bit of downtime, get some pieces up as well. Because I mean, in my house, I have a lot of pressed pieces as I was practicing over that year that I have up, because I think I love pressed flowers. I press herbs, flowers, everything green. I love greenery pressed. And it's just such nice artwork.
That's amazing. I'll have to check it out for sure, because I think it's so beautiful.
Thank you.
So where can people find you?
So you can find me on Instagram. I hit 5,000 followers today.
Yay!
After 2 years. So that's like really exciting. That was like a big milestone for me today. And I'm at Parched Floral. And then you can find me online, parchedfloral.ca. That's me.
Awesome. And I'll put all of that in the show notes. And today is an extra special day because it's National Floral Day. So it's super exciting that we got to record this episode on
Yes.
the occasion.
Who knew? I had no idea until I woke up this morning and I heard it on the radio, which, like, who listens to radio anymore? But I did, because I happened to be in the car, which I'm never in the car, but I was in the car and they said that. And I thought, how am I not aware of this? I didn't know.
And here we are celebrating, and we didn't even know we were celebrating when we booked this.
I know. So that's amazing. And I hope people bought flowers today for someone or themselves. I did, but I pressed them. They didn't actually stay in a vase. So.
Those will be coming to the website soon, everybody.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much, Amanda, for coming on. I feel like I learned so much, and it's going to be so valuable for our listeners, and definitely will recommend you to all of our future couples.
Thank you so much, Monica.
Bye.
Bye.